Hello again, everyone. This is the second part of our exciting Section 23, The Rise of the Byzantine Empire for History 231, Ancient Mediterranean World. And we left off last time with our scrunkly friend up on the top of the pillar. What I'd like to do now is move on to the rise of a fellow named Justinian, who gets himself a star. He's one of the most interesting characters from this period, and he's well worth taking a little time to talk about because he's a man with a plan. And that's an important thing to remember about him. He is one of those people, we've probably all met people like this, who have plans. They are planners and schemers and things like this. Well, Justinian is also incredibly smart and competent, and he's going to try and make his plan happen. So that's a really interesting story. Now, Anastasius dies, and he's replaced by a 70-year-old Latin-speaking soldier from the Balkans, a fellow named Justin. And Justin rules from 518 to 527, so he's around for quite a while here. And our friend Justin is a clever guy. And he realized something that not all rulers realize. Guys like Alexander the Great, for example, never quite realized this. But you're not going to last forever. You're not going to be around forever. If you want what you do to last, you've got to plan for what happens after you're gone. And this is an important point, all right? This is an important point. So Justin says, I'm going to take my nephew, very smart guy, and his name is Justinian. I'm going to make Justinian my successor. I'm going to plan for my succession immediately, and this is what he does. He prepares this young man to be the emperor, and in 537 AD, our friend Justinian takes the throne in Constantinople. Now, his reign, 527 to 565 AD, is really one of the most memorable in the history of the Byzantine Empire. And that's saying something, because they had some really memorable emperors in the Byzantine Empire. He inherited a good deal, and this is an important point to keep in mind. Some people who come to power are lucky because the guy who came before them did a good job and set up a really good system, a really good situation here. So that's what our friend Justinian does. He inherits a stable and prosperous empire, and he has a vision. He's a man with a plan. So what does he plan to do? A couple of things. Number one, we're going to get things organized. We're going to get things unified in the empire. And that means we're going to start with Christianity. We're going to have one form of Christianity, a single form of Orthodox Christianity, and it is going to be what everyone follows, and that's just beneath the way it is. All right, so that's the first thing. It's going to be the center of his plan. Arianism, the barbarian kingdoms around us, they're done. We're not going to do that. It's going to be the one Orthodox view. That's it. And that's the first thing he's going to set out to try and do here. All right, and this, of course, is pushing against reality, of course, but this is what he does. So the first thing he says, okay, if we're going to make this work, we've got to do some changes to the bureaucracy. Now, this is one of the interesting things. Some people come to power, and the last thing in the world they want to do is deal with bureaucracy. They don't like to deal with the complicated day-to-day running of a state, and those people never do very well. They really don't. It's a bad idea. If you're going to be in charge of anything, whether it is a business, whether it is a big company, whether it is a country, you've got to be ready and willing to handle bureaucracy and the dull day-to-day things. So this is what he sets out to do. He says, we got to set up a system that is going to be able to make this work better. And that means we're going to start with a law code, legal reforms. He sets in motion a bunch of very important legal reforms, because here was the problem. The legal system of the Byzantine Empire was kind of a mess. It had inherited the old Roman system, all right? And over 500 years, this had turned into a messy, unwieldy mass of laws, not all that agreed with each other. It was just kind of ad hoc, the way they had been doing things all this time here. And not only that, they had all the opinions of people making legal decisions, and they didn't always agree with each other either. There were all sorts of contradictions, all sorts of uncertainties. That won't work, he says. We've got to fix this. So we're going to set this out, and we're going to make this work. And he gets a senior administrator, a guy named Tribunician. Oh, God, I suck at speaking. Anyway, but there he is. He sets this guy, and he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a legal system, a legal code to run things, and it's going to have three parts. Part number one is going to be the code. The first part is the code. The code is a collection of imperial decrees. Here is what the emperor has said, and here's what past emperors said, and we're going to use these as laws. We're going to use these things, and only decrees from this collection of codes is going to be used in courts. You cannot use laws from outside of this, which makes perfect sense, right? So that's the first part. The second part is the digest, and that's a collection of the opinions of judges, and this is an important thing. I have a book somewhere, it's probably in my office, a book of the opinions of the Supreme Court of the United States on all sorts of different things. All the different amendments to the Constitution, so they'll have First Amendment questions, Second Amendment questions, Third Amendment questions, etc. There's always my favorite, the Eighth Amendment. You can look up why that's an interesting amendment, doesn't get much attention. But the court, the High Court, particularly the Supreme Court, has over the years, over the centuries this country's been around, issued opinions about what those amendments and those laws actually mean. And the Supreme Court is the final say in all of this. And this is really what the Digest is doing as well. It's like that book I have. It's the opinions of jurists. And it's about 1,000,000 words long, okay? Now that may seem long, but he trimmed it down from 3,000,000 words. He's trying to make things more efficient here. Finally, there's the Institute, which is a textbook to how to train lawyers. This is an important thing. You want all your lawyers to know the law. You want them to know the law the same way, one to the other, so they can discuss things. They can work this all out. And that is going to be very important. And by 533 AD, they had finished setting all this up, and this put things together here. Now, the other thing Justinian sets out to do is, again, it's going to be a Christian state the way I think Christianity is going to work, and that means paganism, the last little bits of paganism, is gone. And so he shuts down the last pagan school in Athens, and you can imagine all these old codgers who were still pagans, still worshiping the pagan gods, no idea what was going on around them, with their heads are in the clouds, as scholars often are, and one day it shows up and says, we're shutting you down. All right? Must have been hard for them. Some of them actually packed up and moved east. They left the country, said, we're not going to do this. They're going to go hang around with the Sasanians. They must be more reasonable. Well, not really, but, you know, there it is. Okay, so this is what we see here. So we have this interesting thing. The last little bits of paganism are going to be shut down here. All right? Now, Justinian embraced the Chalcedonian view, the Chalcedon view of Christianity, and he says if you don't follow that particular kind of Christianity, the state comes down on your head here, all right, on your head. And so he deposes the Monophysite patriarch of Constantinople, kicks him out in Egypt. The Monophysites, the Copts, they weren't happy about this. And what happened was, of course, they got alienated. They were alienated by this, which in the end is not going to serve the Byzantine Empire very well, as we will see. In fact, a lot of people were unhappy about this. This is the thing. When you come in and make these big changes, you make these kinds of big changes, you're going to alienate someone somewhere. It's inevitable. It's always going to happen. So if you ever get into a political situation, you've got to be a little bit careful about making big changes. Presidents of the United States have sometimes done this, and they've alienated a lot of people. The presidents who made the biggest changes have alienated a lot of people as a result. And you've got to be able to navigate that alienation here. You've got to be able to navigate that alienation. Well, our friend Justinian, he pushed it just a little too far. He pushed it just a little too far. He was a ruthless guy. He did not mess around. He was serious about what he was doing. All right. He had a number of important ministers, all right, who would impose his ideas. One was a guy named John of Cappadocia, who was a very poorly educated guy, but a very determined sort of guy, and he is of the opinion that rich people suck. And so therefore, if you're a rich person and you don't like what Justinian's doing, too dang bad. Well, this is always risky. All right, because wealthy people have power. Wealthy people have money. They can buy power. They can buy influence and things like this. And so what this guy does, what our friend John does, is he sets out to end the exceptions for the elite, so they're no longer exempt for all sorts of goody stuff here. And they had a cozy relationship with the bureaucracy, and he ends that. And anyone who didn't agree with him, he had no problem basically kicking him in the teeth. Literally. He would humiliate them, he would beat them in public, all this sort of thing. And this, of course, trims down the civil service and all this kind of thing, but lots of resentment starts coming out of this. Lots and lots of resentment comes out of this. And here's the thing. You've got to be very careful when you make these kinds of reforms, because the wealthy, powerful classes, yes, they may be unreasonable and they may be jerks, but they also have real skills that you need to run things. You need these professional classes. And what old John of Chalcedonia does, or Cappadocia, sorry, John of Cappadocia does, is he alienates these people. All right? And pretty soon they said no more. All right? Pretty soon there's going to be problems. Now the poor, they said, this is okay. We don't care what happens to these rich guys. That's not a big deal here. But there was the problem the poor had to face too, and that was food shortages. So this is a ticking time bomb. The rich are getting ticked off because of one thing, the poor are getting ticked off because of food shortages, another thing, and in 532 AD, rioting starts. Now, I've said this before in this class. When they rioted in those days, they were serious about their riots. They really, really were serious. It went crazy. And these are called the Nika riots. N-I-K-A, the Nika riots. And Justinian realized, oh my gosh, I've pushed too hard. I've overstepped what I should have done. He says, okay, fine. Listen, calm down. It's okay. I'll fire this guy, John. I'll get rid of him. He gets up in the imperial box. He's telling people, listen, it's okay. I'll calm down. I hear you. I hear you, man. I hear you. But unfortunately, one of the problems with violence, one of the problems with riots and mobs is they get out of control. And you can't calm them down this way. All right? And it got bad. It got really bad. And Justinian was thinking, oh my gosh, I've overstepped. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to die. They're going to kill me. They're going to hang me. All right, they're going to hang me. And he wouldn't be the first or the last person in history to be powerful and be coming down hard because of that. All right? And so he's thinking, uh-oh, I better get out of town. I better pack my bags and get the heck out of here and save my own skin, my own neck. And he would have. He really would have. Except for one little thing. His wife. His wife is a lady named Theodora. Now, Theodora gets a star. She is a formidable lady and a fascinating character. And one that we got to be a little careful because our sources for her are not always friendly to her. But let's talk about Theodora here. What she said to him is this. Listen, honey. Listen, sweetheart. You're going to die someday anyway. Nobody lives forever. So you might as well die wearing the purple robe of an emperor rather than on the run. And she steals up her husband, and he says, you're right, and he hangs in, and then he says, we're going to stop this the hard way. And that means violence. And what he does is he sends in the troops here. He sends in the troops. As many as 30,000 people were killed when he put down these riots. It was bad. It was messy. But he does it. He does it. Now, Justinian had one skill in particular that we should all pay close attention to, and that is one that you should all try to acquire, and that is the ability to find, pick, and promote smart people. If you have an organization of any kind, whether it's a business or you're in government or whatever it happens to be, and you have the ability to find smart, clever people, smart people who know what they're doing and can do a good job, and put them in positions of authority, you are going to do better. If, on the other hand, you just pick your cousin or your friend or your son-in-law or whoever that happens to be because you like them, that doesn't mean they're going to be any good at that job. And history is filled with leaders who did that, who said, okay, I'll just pick somebody I like, my old college roommate or something like that, without saying, is this person really good at what they're doing? Justinian knew how to find quality people. He knew how to find smart people, effective people, people who were loyal, people who could make things work here. All right, let's take a look at a couple of these. Number one, his wife. Now, Theodora, as I said, is nobody to mess with. This was one tough lady. She also had a mean streak, all right? She had, how do I put this nicely, a colorful background. Now, keep in mind that what we know about her comes from a guy who hated her. And always keep in mind, if someone hates you, they're going to publish the things about you they don't like, the things that are bad. But what we find about her is that her father had actually worked in the games, had been a bear keeper. All right, sports in these days was tied to politics. So imagine if your Super Bowl team was tied to your choice for Senate or something like that. And what is interesting about this is her father dies and leaves her penniless. She was dirt poor as you can be. But she's clever. She's a very clever woman, and she has a couple of assets that she's willing to use. One of which is she has absolutely no inhibitions. Absolutely none, no inhibitions at all. Her striptease acts were legendary. She was a stripper. She was a sex worker, all right? And she worked almost certainly as a prostitute, all right? And the guy who wrote about her, a guy named Procopius, hated her guts. So we got to be careful what he says, because he's certainly not going to say nice things about her. All right, but it does make for very juicy reading. At about age 16, we're told she quit her promising career as a prostitute and a stripper and married a provincial administrator. It did not go well. It was not a good marriage, and he kicks her out while they're in Egypt. He kicks her out, so she works her way back, and that is a very bad pun because she worked her way back on her back to Constantinople here. She gets back to Constantinople. Now, we don't know how she met Justinian. I mean, because this woman, literally, she is a streetwalker. She is a prostitute. She is at the bottom of the social scale, and she meets the future emperor. But here's what happens. They meet each other, and it was one of those amazing stories. They were perfect for each other. There are some people who, if they can hook up, are going to be hooked up for life. They're going to hook up like nobody's business. All right? If you can find that person, go for it. Hook to them. All right? Just be careful, because you don't want to find the wrong person and think you've done that and then wind up with someone you don't fit in well with. But those two, Justinian and Theodora, they were completely loyal to each other. They were a perfect couple here. All right? He is a schemer. He is a guy with a plan, a man with a plan, we would call him. She is quick-witted. She's smart. She's a survivor. You don't mess with this woman. All right? They complement each other perfectly. They get married. All right? They get married. And Justinian now has power. He comes to power. And guess what starts happening to Theodora's old enemies? And she had a lot of them. They all start to disappear. I can't imagine what happened to her first husband. If that guy had any brains, he'd get out of town, because this woman had a vengeance streak a mile wide. So that's a real problem here. All right, that's a real problem. Now, she had monophysite leanings, all right? And even though the Chalcedonian Christianity is what Justinian likes, and this is always an interesting thing as well. So she's fascinating, really a fascinating lady and nobody to mess with. Then we have a fellow named Belisarius. He's a military genius, highly charismatic general. He had married another ex-actress, all right? Her name was Antonia, all right? And she and Theodora were friends. So what you've got is this little cadre of people at the very top, all of whom are good buddies with each other, all right? Then we have our friend Narses. Now, Narses is a eunuch. That is to say, parts of his body, his genitals, had been surgically, well, nastily removed, and that meant he had no family and nothing else to think about his legacy or anything like that, so his legacy was, well, the government. And he was another military genius here, another brilliant, brilliant guy. And here's the thing, he lived to be almost 100 years old. He lived to be almost 100 years old. And that's an interesting sort of thing, all right? So, this is what they have. And what do? They're going to launch this plan. Once they've got the home situation under control, once the Nika riots and massacres are over, people in Constantinople calm down, and they realize don't mess with the boss because he'll kill you. And so now Justinian can work on his plan. And his plan is this. He wants to put the old Roman Empire back together, and that means he's got to reconquer the West. He's got to bring the West back into his power here. And so he sets out to do this here. Right? He sets out to do this. He starts in Africa, and he's able to take North Africa, the western part of North Africa. He destroys the Vandal kingdom in North Africa, completely annihilates it, and that's the end of that. All right? He brought its king, a guy named, Gelimer, all right, back to Constantinople, led him through the streets, an old-style Roman triumph, and nothing good happened to poor Gelimer, and that was the end of him. The Vandals, they're gone. They disappear from history. They literally just disappeared, probably absorbed into the population around them here. And Africa would remain under Byzantine control until the 7th century when the Arab conquest happened. So this part, he did succeed. All right, this part they succeeded at. Italy, which of course is the prize, you want to get Italy and get Rome, this did not go so well. Justinian tried to make it work, and it didn't work. All right, the Ostrogoths are in charge of Italy at this time. They are Arians, and therefore not, in his mind, good Christians. But the Italians didn't welcome the Byzantines. Times had changed. Times had changed, and this means you've got a 20-year war. It gets dragged on and on and on. And the thing you have to understand about war, and this is a very important lesson, war sucks. That's the first thing. Long wars suck even more, because a long war will drag you through the mud for year after year after year, killing people, costing you money, all sorts of things. War is not something to take lightly, and altogether too many people in history have thought it would be easy and have been proved wrong. And unfortunately, the campaign in Italy costs Justinian dearly, because it drags on and on and on. But he's going to try. He also had many other plans, and then he had some incredibly bad luck, which is what we will see next time. But I will stop this recording here and pick up on the next one with his exciting story.